birthday. I
Like and subscribe, guys. This is Dana Watch Channel.
causing me to miss the last train home. I was left waiting for the midnight train on an eerily deserted platform. My usual call to my brother for a ride was futile, as he was out of town, and a cab was beyond my budget. The winter chill bit through my jacket, and a light snow began to fall, casting a ghostly haze under the platform lights. To distract myself, I played games on.
I wouldn't like to be alone at night. I'm like that, my friends. Nah.
An old man appeared, shuffling towards me. His tattered jacket and hunched posture added an unsettling air to the already chilling atmosphere. He took a seat on the bench across from me, his gaze unsettlingly fixed in my direction. Something about him seemed off. His eyes were vacant, almost as if he was lost in a distant memory. He suddenly broke the silence, asking in a gravelly voice,
"Has the train come yet?"
I replied nervously.
No, it's been delayed because of the snow.
He just kept staring, then began mumbling to himself, adding to my growing discomfort. Feeling increasingly uneasy
You've got to come home to with me, mate. I would have been off.
of my eye, I saw him inch closer. I glanced away for a moment, and when I looked back, he was alarmingly close, his face expressionless.
Are you all right, sir?
I asked hesitantly. He just stared with a hollow gaze, then slowly raised his hand, pointing at me. In a surge of fear, I ran as fast as I could down the platform. I didn't stop until I reached the next station, panting and shivering from both the cold and fear. I sat down, my eyes darting around in paranoia, not realizing what he wanted. But then, I heard a soft sound. His eyes hauntingly fixed on me. I yelled.
What do you want?
My voice echoed in the empty station. He began to circle me, slowly making his way towards me. My back retreating against the cold wall, I shouted,
Stay back.
In a sudden move, he lunged at me, but I dodged, causing him to crash to the ground. I stood frozen as he lay there motionless. Approaching cautiously, I noticed he was bleeding from his head. I tried to talk to him, but there was no response. I called for help, and soon the police and an ambulance arrived. They told me the man was suffering from severe dementia and had wandered away from his care home. That night stayed with me, haunting my thoughts. The midnight train
That's bad.
will stay forever with me. Just after my 18th birthday,
I recently moved into a very small one-story house that was close to my place of work. I used to have to drive almost an hour every day, so this move was really nice. The only thing was that I'd never really been anywhere in the area outside of where I worked, so it really was like moving to a completely different place. Anyway, this night I got off at 6 and drove straight home. I had to work again the next day, so I wasn't planning on doing much, probably just chill and eat for a bit, then get in bed. I pulled into my garage and went inside, warming up some leftover pizza in the oven, but while it was heating up, there was a ring at my doorbell. It actually made me jump because I hadn't heard the doorbell before, but I had no idea who would be here either. I walked down to the front door and looked. It was a woman. She looked maybe 50 and had long gray hair. I opened the door.
Hi, how can I help you?
She smiled wide and said she'd noticed I'd moved in recently. We talked for a minute as she asked about where I came from, if I had a wife or kids, and all that random small talk. Then she said goodnight and walked off. I never really had the chance to ask her who she even was, but I assumed she was just some old lady that lived down the block. But something about her though just felt off. I don't know how else to describe it, but I wasn't sure if there was actually something off, or if it was just because she was old. I went back to the kitchen and got my pizza, then sat on the couch and started looking for a good video on YouTube to watch. I found some
Classic. Like and subscribe, guys. Let's get to 1,000 likes and oh yeah.
and listened, realizing it was an idle car engine, but it was really loud. I got up and looked out the front window. There was a car parked right in front of my house. It was running, but all the headlights were off. I looked down both sides of the road, seeing the whole street was empty, with tons of other places to park. yet they had chosen right in front of my house. I watched the car for a couple minutes, but with no changes
More of these vids, please leave a comment down below.
went by, with the car's engine still being audible right outside the house, until it suddenly shut off. I paused the TV again and listened, not hearing anything else. After a minute, I got up and walked over to the window, looking out and seeing the car exactly how it was before, except it obviously wasn't running anymore. Again, nobody else was outside. It was just this one car. I shut the blinds, just to make sure nobody was watching me for some reason. Then I went back to the couch and started cleaning up. But there was only a moment before a quiet thump sounded from the other side of the house. Already feeling a little on edge, I walked over to the hallway and looked down toward the kitchen. For a split second, I saw the shadow of someone walking away from the back door, as if they'd noticed me and were trying to hide. Their footsteps quickly ran around the house toward the front, and when I looked out the window, I saw a man getting inside the parked car, driving away immediately. The first thing I did was go to the back door and open it, trying to figure out why he was out there. And it only took me a few seconds to notice that the handle on the outside was really loose, like they had been trying to take it off. Even just by pulling the flimsy handle a bit to the side, I could see the inner workings of the lock in the door, meaning he probably would have been able to unlock it, and he was only moments away from getting inside my house. I can't say for certain if the old lady from before had anything to do with it. I know it sounds strange that she would, but I thought about the questions she was asking me, which all had to do with whether anyone else lived with me. Maybe she was getting information to know if I was a good target for whatever they planned. It's been a few months since, and I've
That's mad, that, isn't it, guys?
Last December, I traveled across the country to meet my parents and siblings for Christmas. My parents had a decent-sized house, so we would usually just all stay there and sleep on the couch or in the spare bedrooms. That being said, I didn't rent any hotels, even
This is Creepy Horror Story nightclub, guys.
the whole night. I left early on the 23rd, planning it out to get to the house around dinner time. As I started the drive, snow was lightly coming down. Nothing crazy, but enough to cause a bit of traffic. This went on for a few hours, until it suddenly started pouring down. It happened over just 30 minutes, going from a very light downfall to an extremely heavy storm. Along with the winds, it was nearly impossible to see anything in front of me. Most other cars started to pull off to the side of the road, but I really wanted to keep going. I drove in these horrible conditions for the better part of an hour, having a few close calls before deciding enough was enough. I pulled into a motel and sat in the parking lot, waiting for the snow to clear up. There were a lot of other cars in the parking lot, but I think most were probably trying to wait it out like I was. But as the sun started to set, there was no chance of that happening anytime soon. I reluctantly went in and got a room. I went to my room and lay down on the bed. It was around 8 o'clock at this point, and I'd figured I'd just sleep now and see if it was clear in a few hours. I set an alarm on my phone for 11, then passed out. But when I woke up, I immediately knew something was wrong. I turned and looked at my phone, seeing it was just before 2 a.m. My alarm didn't go off. I quickly got out of bed and ran up to the window. The parking lot was almost empty now, but it was still snowing pretty bad. I sat back on the bed, and after some thinking, I decided to take the loss and just spend the rest of the night there and hope for the best in the morning. I laid down, closing my eyes, but now that I was more calm, something caught my attention. A cold breeze blowing through the room, and the clear sound of wind. I sat up, seeing the window at the end of the bed was cracked open. I got up and shut it, but I was almost positive it was closed when I went to bed. It's something I definitely would have noticed, being that there was a whole storm outside. A rush of adrenaline went through me as I started to worry. I faced the rest of the room, now looking into the dark and standing still, listening for anything. Then I slowly walked around, checking for anything missing or any signs that someone had been inside. I didn't see or find anything until I went to check out the peephole. That's when I noticed that both locks on the door were now open. Someone had unlocked it from the inside. Blood rushed from my face as I locked the door and backed away, thinking through every possible horrifying scenario that I could be caught in right now. I started putting my things back into my bag and getting ready to leave, but then there was a sudden shake of the door handle. I stared at it with wide eyes, seeing the handle move back and forth like they were trying to force it open. Then it went silent. I waited for a long couple minutes before I slowly and quietly crept toward the door to check if it was safe to make a run for my car. I looked out the peephole, seeing a man leaning against the door like he was listening. I was
Freaky out.
because only a few seconds later, he rushed away from the door. I spent no time waiting, leaving the room soon after and getting in my car, pulling out and leaving the motel. I got lucky, as nobody else was on the roads and they seemed to have just been plowed. I drove through the storm until I got to my parents' house, taking much longer than it should have. What that man was trying to do, I can't even begin to think of. They had obviously been in the room while I was sleeping and unlocked the door, but what they wanted and why they had to come back to my room, I just don't know. But if I hadn't woken up when I did and stayed asleep for just a minute longer, I might have never made it to my parents' house.
In 2008, I was taking a long trip through the USA, hitchhiking most of the way to save on travel expenses. At the time, I was in Connecticut and trying to get from New Haven to Hartford. This was actually near the end of my journey, as I'd started on the West Coast and had only had positive experiences the entire way. Friendly strangers offering me rides, kind locals offering me couches to sleep on, the whole shebang. Connecticut, unfortunately, is where my trip turned a little sour, and I finally came to realize the dangers of hitchhiking. Some guy I had just met offered me a ride up to Hartford. Said he was headed there himself, and wouldn't mind a little company on the journey. Sounded good to me. Nothing about him seemed suspicious or anything. Just a normal-looking dude. He was around 40 years old, muscular, like an outdoorsy type of guy. Had a picture of his family on the dashboard, a crucifix around his neck, and spoke real polite and friendly. We started rolling on down the road, and he gets to talking with me. Conversation was light-hearted and jovial, and we spent a lot of the time sitting back and listening to country music on the radio. I asked him what he had been up to that day before he picked me up. He told me nothing major, just saying goodbye to a few friends he had been visiting in the area. Somewhere between New Haven and Meriden, this guy's demeanor suddenly changed. His face went from smiley to serious. The whole atmosphere in the vehicle became darker. I tried talking to him, but he stopped answering me. After about 10 minutes of the silent treatment, he finally spoke. "You know," he said, "when you asked me what I'd been up to all day, I told you I was saying goodbye to friends." Yeah, I replied, not really sure what he was getting at. "I ain't got no friends in New Haven." "Oh," I said, a little unsure of how to feel. There was a long pause as I waited for him to tell me the punchline to this joke or whatever he was building up to. He didn't say anything. I waited a good 30 seconds before asking, "So, what have you been doing all day then?" He turned off onto some thin, country road with trees lining either side. This definitely didn't feel right. The guy sniffed, and, with a blank expression, simply replied, "Digging a hole." My heart was pounding fast now, and became faster as we drove further down the lonely road, the surrounding trees becoming more dense.
Oh, God.
Getting out of the car would have been an overreaction. I decided it wasn't. I unbuckled my seatbelt as the guy began gaining speed, opened the door, and flung myself out of the vehicle. I didn't know what this guy had planned for me, but I didn't want to be a part of it. I rolled on the ground, scraped but mostly uninjured. The guy's car came to a complete standstill up ahead of me, and the red reverse lights came on. He started flooring it in reverse, coming back to get me. I darted down the road, back the way we came, all the while with this guy catching back up to me. I had no choice now. I ran into the woods on my right side, where his car could no longer pursue me. I rushed through the foliage and heard the guy slam his car door, hollering about how I was a stupid so-and-so and how I wasn't going to get away. From the sounds of it, he was chasing behind me, though I didn't dare to turn back and look. I refused to stop moving. Adrenaline is a hell of a thing, and it carried me far enough and fast enough for that guy to lose track of me. When I finally felt like I'd lost him, I found a spot to lay low and remained hidden in those woods for a good hour or so. I eventually made it back to the main road, found help, and called the police. I gave them a full description of the guy and his vehicle, and, being the sweethearts they were, they gave me a ride to the nearest town. My trip across the USA taught me many things, Mainly that most people are inherently good, but I have no doubt I encountered evil that day.
You have to be careful. Don't just don't go
That's the part that keeps me up at.
subscribe.
I was taking a long
A few years back, I picked up a gig as a night security guard at a storage facility on the outskirts of town.
The day of Christmas was a day of...
It was December 2000.
Last winter, I moved to a new home in a new town. I'd only visited the town once for a job interview, and once I got it, I pretty much had to move there. It was a really big step up in my career, so I was really eager for everything to go well. Because the town was kind of in the middle of nowhere though, it made the moving process not so ideal. I had to find a home for rent online and go through the process that way. I know it's not the best way to go about it, but I thought it'd be okay since I'd only be renting for a year and I could always find somewhere else afterward. On December 1st, I packed up everything in my truck and made the drive. I only stopped to fill up the tank along the way, but even then, I didn't make it into town until 9. Like I said, I had been here before when I did the job interview, but I'd never seen the town at night before. It was kind of eerie, as the streetlights were very dim and most of the stores were closed, so all the lights were out. I wasn't used to these smaller towns, so this was very different to me. There wasn't anyone driving around either. It almost felt like I was driving through a ghost town. Another 5 minutes later, I pulled into the neighborhood and up to my new house. It was very small and was in a row next to other similar houses. I parked on the driveway and got my air mattress out, then headed inside. I had sold basically everything before the move, planning to buy new stuff once I got here, so I knew I'd be stuck with an empty home for a while. Inside though, the place was about what I expected. It was old and outdated. The wooden floorboards creaked with every step and the house had a musty smell to it. The layout was simple though. It was one floor with a kitchen and living room, and one long hallway leading to the 2 bedrooms. After quickly looking around, I turned the lights back off and went into the master bedroom, tossing the air mattress down and turning on the pump to get it full. I sat on the floor, tired from the long drive and the stresses of moving, but as I was sitting there, I heard a creak from the other side of the house. It was just one small creak, but it was very distinct, sounding exactly like one of the floorboards. My initial thought was that it might be a raccoon or something that had taken up shelter in the empty home. So I got up and went down the hallway toward the living room. I didn't even bother walking to the front of the room to turn the lights back on. I just glanced around. The room was just as empty as it was before though. I didn't see any signs of anything. I figured it was nothing. Maybe being tired and stressed made me overthink it. After all, this was a new home, so I wasn't familiar with any of the sounds it may be making. I went back to the bedroom. The mattress was full now, so I tossed a blanket on it and laid down. Tomorrow I had a lot to do, so I wanted to get as much sleep as I could get. Despite the not so great setup, I passed out pretty soon after laying down. When I woke up, I remember opening my eyes and had my eyes closed. That's how dark it was. I knew it was sometime in the middle of the night, so I closed my eyes again to try and fall back asleep, when I heard something from just in front of me. It was one of the floorboards creaking. My eyes shot open again, and I quickly sat up. I stared ahead at where I heard the sound, but still, I couldn't make anything out. I sat there motionless. It was so quiet, I could hear my heart beating as I felt a disturbing sense around me. Then there was another creak. It was further to the left of where the last one was. In my head, I started to panic. Part of me didn't even think this was real, like maybe I was still half asleep or something. Before I could shake the feeling, there were 4 consecutive creaks, each sounding further toward the back of the room. Then there was a moment where I felt like I could see the slightest shape of something in the dark before the bedroom door swung open. The moonlight shining into the hallway immediately illuminated a man as he moved from my bedroom and into the hallway. I heard him sprinting to the other side of the house as I got up and rushed to turn on the lights. By then, the front door was wide open. From the glimpse of him that I got, he looked around 40 years old, with worn clothes and boots. That was about all I could see. I got my phone and keys, then got in my truck and drove away as I called the local police station. From everything I told them, they seemed to think that it was someone living in the house while it was unoccupied, but there's really no way to know for sure what was going on. If that was someone living in the home, it doesn't really explain what they were doing in my room, creeping around while I was asleep.
Oh gosh, somebody's signing off. Like and subscribe.
I don't know what would have happened